Close your eyes and let the chill of winter melt into the warmth of your imagination. Tonight, we journey into a world wrapped in snow and silence, where a young soul dares to seek what lies beyond the frost. Feel the soft crunch of snow underfoot, the glow of an ancient light, and the whispers of magic waiting to be discovered. Breathe deeply, relax, and let the quiet strength of this tale guide you into a peaceful slumber. Your adventure begins now. Winter's breath had lingered over the town for as long as anyone could remember. Snow fell in endless cascades, muffling the world in its cold embrace. The townsfolk moved through their days wrapped in thick coats and thicker silences, their faces pale from the long absence of sunlight. Among them was a child named Liora, whose eyes held the brightness of stars, yet whose heart carried the weight of solitude. Liora lived at the edge of the town, where her small home stood against the backdrop of the woods, a vast expanse of towering firs that whispered secrets to the wind. Her days were spent tracing the frost patterns on her window pane or building snowmen who could not reply. Though her voice carried dreams and her mind wove stories from the shadows of the trees, there was no one to share them with. The townsfolk were kind enough, but distant, their lives tethered to practicalities and the unyielding cold. One day, the sky hung low and heavy, casting an ashen light over the land. Liora, restless in her loneliness, pulled on her woolen boots and scarf, venturing into the woods. The snow crunched beneath her feet, and the air smelled sharp, like the edge of a knife. The woods were deep and still, save for the faint rustle of branches. The farther she walked, the quieter the world became, as though she had stepped into a place untouched by time. She came to a clearing where the snow lay unbroken, a perfect canvas of white. Liora hesitated, feeling as though she had stumbled upon something sacred. But the stillness called to her, and she obeyed. She fell backward into the snow, arms and legs moving in sweeping arcs, carving the shape of a snow angel. The motion brought a fleeting sense of joy, as though she had left a mark on an otherwise unyielding world. When she was done, she lay still, staring up at the grey sky. Snowflakes drifted down, cold kisses against her cheeks. She whispered into the quiet, her words barely more than a breath. If only someone could see the world the way I do, someone who would stay. Her words hung in the air, fragile and fleeting, before being swallowed by the wind. Liora sat up and gazed at the snow angel she had made. Its outline was crisp and perfect, its wings spread wide, and its form seemed to glow faintly against the dimness of the clearing. She felt a strange pull in her chest, as though she had set something in motion she could not yet understand. The wind picked up, swirling around her in a sudden icy gust. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches groaning under the weight of snow. Liora's breath caught as a faint melody filled the air, a sound like the tinkling of distant bells. She turned, her eyes searching the clearing, but she saw only the snow angel she had shaped, its form unchanged, yet somehow different. The light dimmed, the sky growing darker, though the hour was still early. A sense of anticipation gripped her, a feeling that she was no longer alone. The melody grew louder, harmonizing with the sighing wind. Liora's heart raced. She opened her mouth to call out, but no words came, only a white cloud of her breath. And then it happened. The snow angel began to shimmer. At first, it was faint, a soft, silvery glow emanating from the snow itself. But as Liora watched, rooted to the spot, the glow grew brighter, more intense, until the entire clearing seemed bathed in light. The snow angel moved, not slowly, not clumsily, but with an elegance that defied explanation. Its wings shifted, its arms lifted, and then it rose from the ground, hovering like a wisp of winter mist brought to life. Liora stared, her breath shallow, her hands trembling. The figure was translucent, its form both solid and ethereal, its face indistinct yet kind. It hovered before her, its head tilting as if studying her. "I heard your wish," it said, its voice like the softest chime of breaking ice. "I am Alira, the snow angel, born of your longing and the magic of this winter's night." Liora's lips parted, but her voice felt trapped in her throat. She swallowed hard, managing to whisper, "You heard me?" Alira inclined her head, her movements fluid and graceful. "Loneliness carries farther than you think, child. It drifts on the winds, settles in the snow, and waits for someone to answer." The snow angel's words sent a shiver through Liora, not from fear, but from the strange and unexplainable sense that she was standing at the edge of something extraordinary. The clearing, the snow, the trees, everything felt alive, as though the very world had awakened to watch this moment unfold. "What do you want from me?" Liora asked at last, her voice trembling. Alira's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Not what I want, but what you need. I have come to show you the wonders hidden in the world you already know." The snow swirled again, and the light dimmed, leaving the clearing bathed in a soft, unearthly glow. Liora reached out, her fingers brushing against Alira's icy hand. It was cold, yes, but not unkind. She felt a surge of warmth in her chest, a spark of hope. "What wonders?" Liora asked, her voice steadier now. Alira's eyes, shimmering pools of winter's light, met hers. "Follow me, and you shall see." The woods stretched on endlessly as Liora followed the snow angel, Alira, her steps crunching softly in the untouched snow. The air around them grew thicker, heavy with something she could not name. The sky above darkened into a deep indigo, and the trees seemed taller, their branches twisting into shapes that whispered secrets she could almost hear. Alira moved with a grace that defied gravity, her feet never sinking into the snow, her wings trailing faint glimmers of frost. She looked back only occasionally, her gaze urging Liora onward. Each time their eyes met, Liora felt a strange pull in her chest, as though some invisible thread connected them. "Where are we going?" Liora asked at last, her voice breaking the near-sacred quiet. "To a place forgotten by most," Alira replied, her voice carrying a melody Liora couldn't quite place. "A place where the veil between the mundane and the magical is thinnest. It is there that you will begin to see." "See what?" Liora pressed, her curiosity outweighing her hesitation. "The beauty hidden beneath the frost, the wonder buried by winter's silence." "But beware," Alira said, her tone soft but edged with warning. "The magic of this place is not without its price. What you see will depend on the courage you bring." Liora swallowed hard, but nodded, her resolve firm. She had spent too many days feeling as though the world was grey and lifeless. If there was something more, she wanted to find it. The trees opened up into a clearing that stole Liora's breath. At its center stood an ancient oak, its branches heavy with icicles that caught and refracted the faint light, casting shifting rainbows onto the snow below. The tree was unlike any Liora had ever seen. Its bark shimmered as though it were made of silver, and its roots twisted into intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with a soft bluish light. "This," Alira said, her voice reverent, "is the heart of the Frostbound Grove." The name sent a shiver through Liora, though not from cold. She stepped closer, her boots sinking into the snow, her eyes wide as she took in the tree's impossible beauty. The air here felt different, thicker, more alive. It hummed with an energy that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "It is where winter's magic is born," Alira replied. She reached out a hand, her fingers brushing the oak's bark. At her touch, the tree glowed brighter, and images began to flicker across its surface. Liora gasped as she saw the visions take shape. Children laughing as they built snowmen, animals leaping through the forest, and townsfolk gathered around fires, their faces alight with joy. "These are the memories of your town," Alira said. "Once, its people embraced winter's magic, finding beauty and wonder in its cold embrace. But fear and sorrow crept in, sealing their hearts and locking away the light." Liora stepped closer, her fingers trailing the glowing images. They felt warm, alive, as though they carried the essence of the moments they depicted. "Why did they change?" she asked, her voice heavy with sadness. "Winter can be harsh," Alira replied. "Its cold tests the soul. Over time, they forgot how to see the beauty within the frost, and their joy was buried beneath the snow." Liora's chest ached with a longing she couldn't fully understand. "Can it be brought back?" Alira's smile was enigmatic, her gaze deep and knowing. "Perhaps, but first, You must confront the shadows that guard it. The words sent a chill down Liora's spine. She turned to Alira, her brow furrowed. Shadows? What do you mean? Alira gestured to the edges of the clearing, where the trees grew darker, their branches clawing at the sky. The shadows of fear and sorrow that linger in the hearts of your people. They have taken root, twisting the magic of this grove. To restore the light, you must face them. Liora's hands clenched at her sides. She felt small and unprepared, but a fire kindled within her, a determination to understand, to make a difference. What do I have to do? She asked, her voice steady despite her fear. Trust your heart, Alira said, her voice softer now. Even the smallest light can banish the darkest shadow. But beware, what you see will test you. The tree pulsed again, its light flickering as though anticipating what was to come. Liora took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the shadowed edges of the grove. She didn't fully understand what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't turn back now. The Frostbound Grove held its breath as Liora stepped closer to the edges of the clearing. Here, where the light from the ancient oak faded, the air grew colder, sharper. Shadows moved among the trees, not the ordinary play of light and branches, but something alive, shifting with an intent she could feel but not name. Alira remained by the glowing oak, her form radiant and still, a sentinel of calm amidst the encroaching dark. This path is yours to walk, Liora, she said, her voice as soft and steady as falling snow. But know that I will be here, watching over you. Liora hesitated, her breath visible in the frigid air. Her courage flickered, wavering like a candle in a storm. But then she thought of the visions on the tree, the laughter, the warmth, the life that had once filled her town. If there was a way to bring it back, she would find it. She took her first step into the shadowed forest. The silence here was oppressive. The snow no longer crunched beneath her feet. It swallowed sound entirely. The trees loomed closer together, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the faint light from the grove behind her. The farther she walked, the darker it became, until even the memory of warmth seemed distant. And then she saw them. At first, they were only faint shapes at the edge of her vision. Dark, amorphous figures that shifted like smoke. But as she ventured deeper, they grew clearer. The shadows had form now, and faces, though their features were distorted, as if seen through rippling water. Their eyes glowed faintly, pinpricks of light that held neither malice nor kindness, only an aching sorrow. Liora's steps faltered, her heart pounding. She wanted to turn back, to run to the safety of the grove, but Alira's words echoed in her mind. Trust your heart. She forced herself to stand still as the shadows drew closer, their movements slow and deliberate. One figure, taller than the rest, reached out a hand. Its fingers were long and thin, like the gnarled branches of a winter-stripped tree. The gesture was not threatening, but neither was it inviting. It felt like a test. "What are you?" Liora asked, her voice trembling. The shadow tilted its head, its faintly glowing eyes fixed on her. When it spoke, its voice was a low murmur, like wind moving through hollow places. "We are what was left behind. The fears they buried, the pain they would not face. Forgotten, but not gone." Liora's throat tightened. She thought of the townsfolk, their distant eyes, their cold smiles. She had always sensed there was something missing in them, something they were too afraid to confront. "Can you be undone?" she asked, though the words felt strange on her tongue. The shadow's hand lowered, its form shifting again. "We are bound by the roots of the grove," it said. "As long as the frost holds sway, we will remain." Liora glanced around, her eyes darting to the darkened forest floor. The roots of the ancient oak stretched here too, twisted and thick, their surfaces covered in frost. She knelt and touched one, feeling the icy chill seep into her fingers. For a moment, an image flashed in her mind, one of her own loneliness, sitting by the window in her home, watching the snow fall endlessly. It was a sharp, aching pang, but it was hers. And then she understood. "You aren't just their fears," she said, standing again and looking at the shadows. "You're everyone's. You're mine too." The shadow closest to her paused, its form stilling as though her words had struck something deep within. Slowly, it nodded. "We are the winter of the heart, and winter must be faced." Liora's hands clenched into fists. "Then I'll face you." The shadow surged forward, not to attack, but to envelop her. Cold washed over her, a deep, bone-chilling cold that carried with it every doubt, every fear, every sorrow she had ever felt. For a moment it was overwhelming, and she thought she might sink beneath it. But then, from somewhere deep within, she remembered the warmth she had felt at the grove, the glow of the ancient oak, and Alira's steady presence. She held onto that light, letting it grow inside her until it pushed back against the darkness. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering like dying flames. Liora opened her eyes, her breath steady now. The shadows didn't disappear, but they no longer loomed. They hovered at the edges of the clearing, watching, waiting. "You're not my enemy," she said quietly, more to herself than to them. "You're just part of the winter." The tall shadow bowed its head, a gesture of acknowledgement. And then, as silently as they had appeared, the shadows melted back into the forest, leaving Liora alone. When she returned to the clearing, Alira was waiting, her expression serene. "You faced the shadows," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "Few have the courage to do so." Liora looked back at the darkened forest. "I didn't defeat them," she said. "I don't think they can be defeated." Alira smiled faintly. Not everything is meant to be conquered, child. Sometimes it is enough to understand. The oak tree pulsed with light once more, and Liora felt a new strength within her. The grove was alive, and so was she. The journey was far from over, but she was ready to take the next step. The grove seemed to breathe again as Liora stood before the ancient oak. Its light, once faint and hesitant, now pulsed with a steady rhythm, a heartbeat for the winter-bound world around it. The air felt warmer, though no less heavy with mystery, and the distant echoes of Alira's words lingered in Liora's mind. Not everything is meant to be conquered. Sometimes it is enough to understand. But the shadows' voices were not so easily forgotten. Their whispers clung to her thoughts, urging her towards something deeper, something buried within the heart of winter itself. Liora turned to Alira, who watched her with that same enigmatic calm. "There's more, isn't there?" Liora asked. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of her unspoken fears. Alira inclined her head, her wings shimmering faintly as they unfurled. The shadows were only the beginning. They are born of what lies beneath this grove, a deeper sorrow, a truth hidden beneath the ice. Liora frowned, her gaze drawn to the tree's roots, which sprawled across the snow like veins. What truth? The truth of the winter's heart, Alira replied, her voice soft but unyielding. It is the source of the frost, the cradle of the town's long winter. To bring back the warmth you seek, you must journey to it. Liora hesitated, glancing back toward the darkened forest she had just emerged from. Her courage was a fragile thing, newly kindled and vulnerable to the cold winds of doubt. "What if I fail?" she whispered, the question tumbling out before she could stop it. Alira's gaze softened. The frost does not ask for perfection, only perseverance. To walk this path is already an act of bravery. The words settled into Liora's chest, a steadying force against her fear. She nodded, her resolve returning. "Show me the way." Alira stepped forward, her presence radiant and grounding. With a single graceful motion, she touched the trunk of the ancient oak. The tree shuddered, its glow intensifying until the light spilled outward, illuminating a hidden path at its base. The snow melted away, revealing a spiral staircase of ice descending into the earth. "This will lead you to winter's heart," Alira said. Her voice held an unfamiliar weight now, a solemnity that made Liora pause. "But know this, the heart reflects the soul of the one who seeks it. What you find there will not be the same as what others have seen." Liora stared at the staircase, its edges glinting with frost, its descent vanishing into a deep, glowing blue. The cold rising from it felt ancient, more profound than anything she had yet encountered. She looked back at Alira, who nodded silently, as though giving her permission to step into the unknown. Summoning her courage, Liora placed one foot onto the icy step. It held firm beneath her weight, and as she began her descent, the grove above faded from view. The air grew colder with each step, the light dimming until only the faint glow of the ice guided her. Time lost meaning in the endless spiral. Liora couldn't tell if she had been walking for minutes or hours. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft sound of her boots on the ice. But then faintly, she heard it. A sound like the distant hum of wind through hollow places, growing louder as she descended. At last, she reached the bottom. The staircase opened into a cavern, vast and cathedral-like, its walls glittering with frost. At the center stood a pedestal of ice, and atop it, a single shard of something impossibly bright, like frozen starlight. Liora approached cautiously, her breath visible in the frigid air. The shard pulsed faintly, its light casting shifting patterns on the cavern walls. It seemed alive, its glow waxing and waning like a heartbeat. She reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed its surface. The moment she touched it, the cavern came alive. Memories, emotions, and sensations surged through her mind in a torrent. She saw her own life reflected in the shard. The loneliness she had carried, the small joys she had clung to, and the courage that had brought her here. But beyond that, she saw the town's pain, the fear of endless winters, the sorrow of lost warmth, the quiet despair that had settled over its people like a thick blanket of snow. Tears froze on her cheeks as she held the shard, its light seeping into her skin. She felt its truth, its power, and its burden. The winter was not a punishment, nor was it an accident. It was a reflection of the town itself, a mirror of the coldness that had grown within their hearts. "What do I do with this?" she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of the shard's revelations. The cavern did not answer, but deep within, Liora knew. The frost could not be banished with anger or despair. It required light, warmth, and the willingness to embrace even the coldest parts of oneself. Clutching the shard tightly, she turned and began her ascent, her heart heavier yet somehow stronger. The path ahead was uncertain, but Liora now carried the light of winter's heart, and with it, the power to thaw what had long been frozen. When Liora emerged from the icy staircase, the Frostbound Grove was transformed. The ancient oak glowed more brilliantly than before, its light casting warm hues of gold and amber across the snow. The shadows at the edge of the clearing had receded, their presence no longer oppressive, but instead faint, as if they too were waiting for what was to come. Alira stood by the tree, her wings outstretched, the faint frost that trailed them shimmering like stars caught in motion. Her expression was calm but watchful, and as Liora stepped forward, clutching the shard of winter's heart, the snow angel's gaze softened. "You carry it," Alira said, her voice like the chime of distant bells. "The essence of this winter, the reflection of all it holds. Liora looked down at the shard in her hands, its light pulsing steadily, as though alive. It was heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. Within it lay not only the town's fears and sorrows, but also its capacity for warmth and joy. Both sides of a coin that could not exist without the other. "What do I do with it?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Alira stepped closer, her form luminous. "Winter's heart is not something you wield. It is something you share. It responds to the light within you, to the strength you carry. To heal the frost, you must give it what you've already shown: understanding, courage, and a willingness to embrace what others fear." Liora nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around the shard. She thought of the townsfolk, their distant faces and weary eyes. She thought of the shadows she had faced, the reflections of her own pain that she had begun to understand. The frost wasn't just around them, it was within them, and the only way to melt it was to kindle a fire they had forgotten. She stepped toward the ancient oak, its roots sprawling like frozen rivers beneath her feet. The shard in her hands grew brighter as she approached, its light spilling outward to touch the tree's bark. The oak responded with a faint hum, its glow intensifying, and Liora felt the shard grow warm, almost as if it were alive. "What if it's not enough?" she asked, doubt flickering in her voice. Alira's wings folded gently, her gaze steady. "The frost does not melt in an instant, but even the smallest warmth can begin to thaw what seems unyielding. Trust in the light you found." Taking a deep breath, Liora placed the shard against the oak's trunk. For a moment, nothing happened. The grove was silent, the air heavy with anticipation. Then, the light from the shard surged, its glow spreading through the oak's branches, down its roots, and into the earth. The grove seemed to exhale, a great sigh of release, and the frost on the trees and ground began to melt. The warmth spread outward, like ripples in a pond, touching every corner of the grove. The shadows at the edge of the clearing dissolved into mist, their forms fading but not vanishing entirely. They lingered as faint whispers, no longer threatening but simply present, a reminder of what had been and what could be. As the light of winter's heart seeped into the land, Liora felt something shift within her. The heaviness in her chest began to lift, replaced by a quiet, steady strength. She turned to Alira, who stood watching, her form growing fainter with each passing moment. "Are you leaving?" Liora asked, her voice trembling slightly. Alira nodded, her smile both serene and bittersweet. "My purpose here is complete. The grove no longer needs me, and neither do you. The light you carry is more powerful than any magic I could bring." "But I don't want you to go," Liora said, her hands clenching at her sides. "I don't know if I can do this alone." "You are never truly alone," Alira replied, her voice gentle. "The magic of the grove, the warmth of winter's heart. It lives in you now, and as long as you remember what you've learned, you will never lose it. Liora's tears fell silently, freezing before they touched the ground. She stepped forward, reaching for Alira, but the snow angel was already fading, her form dissolving into the shimmering air. "Whenever you see the snow," Alira said, her voice a soft echo, "remember this. The light you seek is already within you." And then she was gone. The grove stood quiet once more, but it no longer felt cold. The ancient oak pulsed faintly with light, its warmth a promise of renewal. Liora stood there for a long moment, her hands empty, but her heart full. She knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. When she returned to the town, she carried the warmth of the grove with her. The people were the same, quiet, distant, but something had shifted. Liora smiled at them, her light shining softly, and little by little they began to respond. A laugh here, a kind word there. It was slow, but it was enough. And in the heart of winter, where the frost once seemed endless, the first seeds of spring began to stir.